So good evening, everyone. My name is Hannah Fearley. I'm a board member of Personal PAC and co-chair of the Future Voices Council. Just a quick housekeeping item, this event is being recorded, so if you prefer not to be visible in the recording, you can turn off your video or change your name if you wish. Finally, we'll be having a question and answer portion of the program later this hour, so please feel free to share any questions you have in the chat or directly to Grace, and we'll hopefully get to them all at the end of the program. So if you attended Jane's Army's first event back in January, then you'll be familiar with where we stand here in Illinois and why this year's election is so critical. But the stakes are so high that we want to quickly recap things and introduce those of you who might be new to what Jane's Army is. So over the last 40 years, the radical anti-choice movement has pursued a single goal: to overturn Roe v. Wade and ban abortion in every state, including Illinois. And now that they finally have a Supreme Court to make that happen, they're wasting no time. Despite the constitutional guarantee to an abortion, this radical court is allowing a near total abortion ban to go into effect in Texas. In most states in the United States, Roe v. Wade is effectively non-existent, with access to abortion unavailable. In the Illinois Supreme Court, anti-choice extremists are just one seat away from controlling the 7-member court in the same way they now control the United States Supreme Court. If we allow them to gain this majority in the 2022 Illinois elections, they could immediately erase all the protections and rights that advocates like you have worked so hard to ensure. And we too will be living in a world without Roe. Since Illinois is currently the only state in the Midwest with laws that explicitly protect abortion, people between the two coasts will have no place to turn for their reproductive health care if we don't succeed in the 2022 elections. This election will have consequences for the next 50 years and has unleashed anti-choice challengers for governor, the Illinois General Assembly, and the Illinois Supreme Court. Every single seat is up for re-election in Illinois, so that includes the governor and the statewide elected officials, all of our state senators and state representatives, many of our county, across the state, many of our county seats. And this only happens once every 10 years, as well as the 2 Illinois Supreme Court races. So the 2022 election will determine the fate of legal abortion in the post-Roe era for generations to come. We really can't emphasize how profoundly important this particular election will be for the future of reproductive freedom in the Midwest, which is why we're excited to have you here tonight, because your participation is essential for us to fight these attacks and ensure victories where they will make a difference. So that's some of the context we're working with. I know that for many, this might be new. In Illinois, things feel pretty good and secure, and you might be thinking, who would have thought that people would be forced to leave the United States to access abortion care in 2022? And how terrible it is that we seem to be back in the pre-Roe v. Wade era when abortion was illegal. And at the same time, we're seeing wins internationally. Just last month, Colombia joined the list of countries that have decriminalized abortion. And turning to our topic tonight, Mexico is making such amazing progress because activists like Nadine Goodman and Verónica Cruz have been so attentive to the fight for decades. We're also honored to have Nadine, Verónica, and Senator Celina Villanueva with us tonight, and we're grateful that you all are joining us. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Terry Cosgrove, our CEO of Personal PAC, for a quick introduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight for this extremely important event. I see so many wonderful supporters of Personal PAC here, and you have personal PACs as well as all the nameless and faceless women across Illinois and now across the country who now have the benefit of a state like Illinois where abortion is safe, legal, and accessible. And that wasn't the case 33 years ago, and it's been all of your support that have made all of this possible. I'm just gonna be brief here because Nadine's gonna tell you all about the work she's doing, so I won't do that. But what I wanna tell you is that I got to know Nadine Goodman close to 10 years ago on a visit to San Miguel, Allende, Mexico, where from the 1980s, she has built CASA from the ground up. CASA is not one building, it's an entire campus of buildings and programs meeting the wide-ranging health and well-being needs of tens of thousands of children and women, including access to the entire scope of reproductive health needs. You can go onto the CASA website after tonight and see all the wonderful things that are happening there. The reason why I insisted on introducing Nadine tonight is that she is a brilliant strategist. She's pragmatic. She's a fighter, a warrior, a fearless champion of reproductive rights who is singularly focused on accomplishing important and nearly impossible goals. In short, Nadine is a personal hero of mine, and I take immeasurable inspiration from her, Vera, and others like them in the trenches when I'm struggling with our work here in Illinois. Nadine works with national, regional, and state Mexican governments, fights her battles nonstop, and pushes the pro-choice feminist boulder up the mountain 1 inch at a time. She has been threatened by prosecutors for refusing to turn over health records that they need to convict women for having illegal abortions. She has stood tall against all odds. We must be clear that things for women and reproductive rights are far from ideal in Mexico, but they have turned a corner for the better. And here in the US, we have turned a dark corner for the worse. In the end, we are all in this together, which is what tonight's discussion is all about. When I was speaking to Nadine last week about some items I wanted to mention tonight, she dryly retorted, "You know, Terry, I've worked long and hard for this horrible reputation," which is perfectly why I admire the hell out of her. It is thus my deep honor to use my horrible reputation in many corners of Illinois to welcome Nadine Goodman, reputation and all. Thank you, Nadine.
Thank you, Terry. And wow, that was that like gets me kind of misty-eyed. Really incredible, and so happy to have you with us, Nadine. I very briefly, I'm Chloe. I, like Hannah, am on the board of Personal PAC, and am one of the people who is trying to, with all of you here assembled, build Jane's Army. So really thrilled to be with you tonight. This is going to be an incredible conversation. I'm going to start with introductions. I'm going to read because everyone's accomplishments are so vast that it's too much for me to memorize. I first want to introduce Veronica. Veronica founded a Mexican nonprofit called Los Libres in 2000 that provides accompaniment to women in search of safe abortions, primarily in Mexico. Los Libres also helps other groups in multiple ways to establish new networks to accompany women who seek abortions. And today, Veronica still works with Los Libres and has direct contact with women in need. And she also holds the position of lead feminist advocacy coordinator. And then last but not least, I'm also excited to welcome Illinois State Senator Celina Villanueva to tonight's conversation. Senator Villanueva represents Illinois' 11th district and began organizing and advocating for her community as a teenager, and is committed to building immigrant power, developing young leaders, expanding voting rights, and engaging immigrant communities and allies. And she currently sits on there's so many, on the Higher Education, Human Rights, Labor, Public Safety, and Transportation Committees. Senator Villanueva has been a champion of reproductive rights, inclusive sex education, and other initiatives to support mothers and families. So we've got a really incredible group assembled here. And I just want to once again welcome and thank everyone for being here. We have this opportunity tonight to kind of metaphorically cross the border and learn from one another's experiences and work to advance reproductive freedom. So I'm just going to dive in because there's more that we could talk about than we will have time for. I'm going to sort of address everyone individually and ask some questions, give you an opportunity to talk about your work, and then we'll come back together and do some follow-ups. So I wanted to just first start with Nadine. Nadine, can you help us just understand the overarching context of abortion access in Mexico? What have some of the major changes been in the last several years? Where do things stand now? And also just sort of selfishly as a native New Yorker, help us set the contrast between what you see in Mexico and what you see in the US.
Sure. Thank you very much, Chloe. And Terry, thank you very much. And I'd also like to quickly thank other people here, starting with Senator Celina, Veronica, everyone at Personal PAC, as well as the people from Future Voices Council and Men in Choice. I know that all of you up to this very moment, and as we've said in the past, frankly, for the rest of our lives, We'll continue to do the grassroots organizing that we have to do every day to build community power. And I think that really all of you have done amazing things in Illinois. Illinois is a very, very important state. I know that as somebody who was born and raised in the United States. Most recently, the fact that you achieved the repealing the Harmful Parental Notification Act, that was just amazing and so needed. And I think also the fact that most recently Governor Pritzker also signed new legislation to improve the visibility and the number of midwives in Illinois. I mean, before there were doctors, hundreds of millions of years ago, literally, there were warriors and health caregivers who were the midwives, and they are still people who are indispensable for reproductive health, including new studies show that there are safe abortion providers, as safe, if not safer, than physicians. So I think all of the work that you all have done has been amazing. And I totally understand why there's a sense of despair with the situation in the United States. I share that too. But what I really feel that even though this whole presentation today is started with the idea that we're doing great in Mexico and the United States is doing horribly, that's kind of a binary polar perspective. That's not true either. There's all sorts of nuances to all of this. And basically we have to continue to learn from each other. But with that said, I will go into some of the specifics of all the great things that have happened. And we've already mentioned in different countries in South America, I mean, starting way back when with Uruguay, that has abortion services that are available to people, as well as other countries more recently, such as Colombia and Argentina. And then in Mexico, we have had most recently this wonderful decision by the Supreme Court, which basically decriminalizes abortion in the whole country. Meaning that for really the first time since I've lived here in 40x years, nobody can be sent to jail because of either having had an abortion or helping somebody to have an abortion. Now that is different than saying that abortion is legalized in Mexico. I really want to make that clear because there are 32 states in Mexico, and most recently, including, was it yesterday, I believe, or today, there are 5 states that have legalized abortion. In the case of Mexico City, it's been for many, many years. But most states, including the state where our offices are, have very conservative, I mean, terrible laws related to abortion. And so now we're in the situation where the Supreme Court has made this declaration, and yet the states are not mandated to change even their constitutions, because in some cases their constitutions have been changed to say that from the moment of conception, that's life, and we can't touch that life. And so we have to change constitutions as well as change penal codes. But really, what I feel very strongly about, and I think will be a recurring theme in our time together, and I hope that most of the time is spent listening to people who are in the audience, not us talking, is the idea that we have to mobilize a community base, and that has to be constant work. And that means underground networks of providers. That means all sorts of things that we've been doing in Mexico for 40 years. And my suspicion is we've stopped doing some of that in the United States. And that could be something that could be contributing in a negative way to the sources that want this right to really be a human right in the United States. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. And I wanted to also sort of pose a similar question to Veronica. Do you have anything to add in terms of what Nadine's saying, either about, you know, this sort of underlying current of activism that helps to advance the cause in Mexico, and just sharing in general what you and other activists and organizations have been doing for people in Mexico, even for people who are in Texas and have been unable to access abortion care. I would love to just hear a little bit about that.
Verónica, ¿tienes algo que agregar a lo que nos acaba de compartir Nadine sobre los recientes cambios en materia de derechos reproductivos en México? Y quizá darnos también una descripción general de las actividades que tú y otros activistas u otras organizaciones en México estáis llevando a cabo para apoyar a quienes se encuentran en Texas en particular, y que no pueden acceder a los servicios de terminación de embarazo debido a las restricciones impuestas por la reciente SB 8.
Gracias, Laura, gracias por la invitación. Y sí, dos cosas agregar nomás al contexto legal en México y la reciente decisión de la Suprema Corte de Justicia de la Nación, que es histórica, porque es el Tribunal Constitucional único en el mundo que decide en materia de aborto unánimemente, ¿no? Y eso significa que tiene una aplicación para todo el territorio mexicano, organizó el desorden jurídico en materia de aborto que teníamos en México. México, un país muy complejo en términos de las leyes y este orden federal. Los tres obstáculos que elimina la Suprema Corte de Justicia de la Nación al declarar inconstitucional el delito de aborto para todo el territorio mexicano, uno es que no pone plazos. La Corte dice, no somos quién, no somos el Tribunal Constitucional, hemos decidido cuidar a la Constitución, proteger a la Constitución, que ya tiene el derecho a decidir en el cuarto constitucional, y lo llena de contenido el derecho a decidir y básicamente dice, las mujeres mexicanas tienen derecho a abortar y el aborto es un derecho humano dentro de los derechos sexuales y reproductivos de las mujeres. Entonces, llena de contenido el derecho al aborto y elimina o declara inconstitucional el delito de aborto. Pero además dice, no somos quien el Tribunal Constitucional para poner plazos. Es siempre, las mujeres pueden interrumpir ese embarazo como un derecho siempre que así lo decidan y lo necesiten. La segunda cosa muy importante es que le manda al Senado unos lineamientos, un orden a la objeción de conciencia y básicamente la sentencia de la Corte dice, nunca más se debe utilizar en México la objeción de conciencia para negar el derecho a las mujeres a acceder al aborto. Y la tercera cosa fundamental de la decisión de la Corte es que también declara inconstitucional 20 reformas constitucionales que existían en México donde se protegía la vida desde el momento de la concepción. Y dice algo fundamental para el debate de aborto, no solo en México, sino en el mundo, porque dice, no, si bien el producto de la gestación es un bien jurídico a proteger, progresivamente se protege a través de la decisión de las mujeres. Y eso ha sido muy importante para organizar, entonces, por eso digo que es un poco complejo México, porque conviven causales, convive el delito, convivían reformas constitucionales que protegían la vida, pero la Corte en el 7 de septiembre del 2021 le pone orden jurídico a este desorden y llena de contenido el aborto como un derecho humano para todas las mexicanas y que nunca más se criminalice a una mujer por abortar.
Senator, I would like to add three more. I would like to add three more things to what Nadine has said before. First of all, this Supreme Court decision in Mexico is absolutely historical because it's the only Supreme Tribunal in the world that has declared unanimously the inconstitutionality of the criminalization of abortion. One of the important things of this decision is also that establish no terms for the interruption of the abortion and fills with content what is the material right of women to determine what to do when with regard to their reproduction rights. It is also key to say that this sentence declared unconstitutional 20 reforms across Mexico that had restricted abortion rights throughout the territory. And fundamentally, what this decision does is to protect the product of reproduction, meaning the fetus, through the protection of the rights to the mother to decide what to do with their reproductive rights. Those are the three, the three main things that this decision, this historic decision, has done in September 7, 2021 to advance the reproductive rights in Mexico.
Y justo en este contexto, como sabemos, el 1 de septiembre del 2021, la CB8 entra, digamos, con esta mayor restricción en territorio tejano. Una semana después, el 7 de septiembre del 2021, la Suprema Corte de Justicia de la Nación declara inconstitucional el delito de aborto. Los medios internacionales, especialmente los medios de Estados Unidos, no podían creer como Estados Unidos va hacia atrás y México va hacia adelante, cuando México siempre habíamos visto a Estados Unidos como el modelo a seguir en la garantía de este derecho, ¿no? El derecho al aborto. Entonces era como de locura. ¿Qué está pasando en el mundo? Y en ese contexto, en esa semana, se nos ocurre, en realidad es un periodista el que hace la pregunta correcta, un periodista de Estados Unidos, quien me dice, a ver, si Las Libres ha desarrollado este modelo para acompañar a mujeres a aborto seguro en casa bajo el protocolo de la Organización Mundial de la Salud, quiere decir que este modelo de acompañamiento en casa puede ser en Texas, lo pueden hacer desde México, y la respuesta es sí, porque en territorio mexicano hoy sobre nadie está la posibilidad de ser criminalizado desde territorio mexicano. Entonces se nos ocurre construir esta solidaridad internacional, esta solidaridad para apoyar y acompañar a las mujeres tejanas en el marco de esta regresión en Texas particularmente, cómo hacer, y empezamos a organizar un encuentro en la frontera, bueno, y además México y Texas comparten territorio. Entonces se nos ocurre hacer en el territorio de la frontera un encuentro entre las redes de acompañamiento mexicanas de la frontera con Texas y las redes que acompañan abortos en Estados Unidos, en Texas, para organizar una red binacional de acompañamiento a aborto seguro a mujeres tejanas.
Nadine, if you don't mind jumping in and maybe translating a bit of that, we lost Laura for a second. I got some of the spirit of it, but want to make sure I do it justice. And you're
Estoy de vuelta. I'm back, but
good.
I missed a little bit of what Veronica was saying. I believe she was talking about what Las Libres, which is her organization, was doing with other networks located in cities bordering Great Texas They began to develop the idea of forming abortion support networks for safe abortions at home under the medical protocol of the World Health Organization. And in order to do that, they organized in January of this year, 2022, a Mexico-US binational meeting to build an accompanying support system, coinciding obviously with the historic ruling of the Supreme Court in Mexico, and almost at the same time with the Texas back down from SB 8. The idea is to assemble sort of like a coalition, a network for international solidarity to protect women's right to abortion in Texas, capitalizing on the scientific advances in the medical, in the field of medical abortion with medication, meaning the abortion pill. I don't know if Verónica, is anything else? Verónica, ¿hay algo más que me he dejado?
I think one of the things that struck me, and then I want to make sure that we bring Senator Villanueva into the conversation. And again, I'm working off of my high school Spanish, so forgive me if it's not perfect. But one of the things that struck me, I feel like Veronica was pointing out, just this progressive decision in Mexico happened about a week apart, more or less, from this regressive, or what we would call regressive decision in Texas, and just sort of that she had this moment of looking at, you know, Mexico has always looked to the US as this model of progress, and just how sort of stunning that was. But that one of the takeaways is that, in fact, we can take the model of, you know, what Los Libres has built, what CASA has built in terms of building these supportive networks for women, and apply that in the case of Texas as well. I hope I summarized that sort of appropriately, but it does transition well into kind of bringing Senator Villanueva into the conversation. And you know, having established that sort of stark contrast, it'd be really interesting, you know, to bring it back not only to the US, but Illinois in particular. You know, I think on both sides of the border, we have these forces that are looking to dismantle Roe and increase attacks on abortion. And so curious to hear from you kind of what you see as the biggest obstacles in terms of protecting reproductive rights and reproductive health care ahead of this critical election in 2022 in Illinois.
That's a really good question. I'm sorry. I'm like trying to do 15 things at the same time. Chloe, can you restate the question for me? Apologies.
Yeah, no, it was a lot.
I'm like trying to follow the script, and then I realized that we were.
No, you're good. You're good. I'm going off script. Sorry. Okay. No, I just wanted to hear about, you know, more specific to Illinois. What do you see as the biggest obstacles in terms of protecting reproductive rights and reproductive health care, and the most critical issues, you know, in this area as we face the 2022 election?
Well, it's the election in and of itself. I think, you know, when we think about kind of what we're going into in this year, we're going into a midterm election. We're going into states that are basically going full throttle in terms of every single different form of government that's running for re-election. And you have a lot of people that I think, you know, and Terry is such a testament to this, where, you know, we've been working on, at least particularly in the state of Illinois, to try to make Illinois kind of this like this safe place for women to be able to come to be able to, again, exert their rights. Because again, for me, this is a right. Reproductive rights are a right. And I think that's apparent to all of those that are participating in this and that work on behalf of these issues. But I think this election in and of itself is the obstacle. We have, you know, midterm elections tend to not be as big as presidential elections. We have issues in terms of voter turnout. but also just in candidates, in, you know, holding candidates accountable to the issues that matter to us, but then also making sure that they're actually voting on this stuff, because it's very easy to say, yes, 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 I'm going to vote on all of these things that you're telling me, you know, that you support. But the reality is your values come out when you really actually, as a legislator, have to vote on these things, when you really actually have to hit the button and say, yes, I'm going to vote on this, or no, I'm going to vote against this in order to make sure that we're protecting women. And I think this is something that unfortunately we've seen before, where we've had folks who have kind of said, yes, I commit to this, but then all of a sudden when push comes to shove, they backtrack. But the reality is, you know, it's also, you know, the barrier of making sure that we're still hearing and sounding the alarm on the grassroots level, that we're still making sure that people know that this is a huge issue. Because I think for me, reproductive rights is part of a larger battle of our overall civil rights and just rights as people in this country, to say we belong here, we deserve, you know, to have the rights to be able to live our lives the way that we see fit. You know, we see this in terms of the right, you know, like the fight that we're seeing against trans people, and their ability to just be able to exist, and trans children. So, you know, it's all of these things. It's such a bigger fight, but the reality is the obstacle in and of itself is the election that's coming up, making sure that we're getting people out to vote, making sure that we're getting people excited about getting out to vote, and understanding the importance of what this election is going to play, not just for like this year, and not just even for the next presidential election, which is in, you know, 2.5 years. This is like literally the fight for our lives, because it's going to set the precedent for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, to see where we are going to go as a country. Like how are we going to move forward, especially after the last 4 years, or the 4 years that we had of the Trump administration, where, you know, as a woman of color, as the daughter of Mexican immigrant parents, as someone who has fought the fight for immigrant rights in this country, as someone who has been in rooms with people who are undocumented, and understanding, you know, like the impact that an administration like the Trump administration had on our everyday lives. This is the same level, you know, like these are the same type of fears, because again, it's this overall arching fight that's going on to basically try to like cut groups out, and to try to take away rights from different groups of people in different ways in order to try to oppress people. That's the actuality of it. So the biggest obstacle is this election, and making sure that we have the energy and get the energy out to other folks and getting them out to vote.
So one of the things you brought up is this, the need for ongoing grassroots activism. And I wanted to, you know, I was going to ask the question, like, I was going to pose this question as like, what have we seen in Mexico that we've seen? But I actually, since this group met a little bit earlier, I actually would love to take this opportunity, instead of posing the question that way, just to sort of let Nadine and Veronica comment on their experience with sort of the power of grassroots activism, and help inspire us a bit here around exactly what you've just brought up.
I mean, I think Celina is 300% right. We're talking about the quality of life for every single human being. This is not even just reproductive justice. This is how we want to live our lives. This is the right, obviously, of a pregnant person, and only that pregnant person, to decide what they want to do with that pregnancy. But we're also talking about economic injustice, we're talking about racism, we're talking about structural violence that do not allow all of us to find out who we are and show our best side and contribute to the best society that we can have. And I think that there's a gut understanding of that, in at least in Mexico. My feeling has been, and I'm not sure if that has been lost with some people in the United States, because we have grown accustomed to having supposedly rights that are being respected. And it's very hard on both levels to understand when a crisis is happening until you really can't get what you want, or, you know, the opposite, people don't miss what they don't know. But I think that, you know, in our case, we identify as a service delivery organization. And if a woman is in need of an abortion, that's one service that is given. If a woman needs daycare, that's another service. If a kid who has been in gangs wants to deal with his artistic expression instead of expressing it through violence, there are programs that way. There are all sorts of different programs to meet all of our multiple different needs. And in the process, you become, as corny as it sounds, a family where, as just Celina, the senator, just said, you share the same values. And the values are that nobody is left behind and that there is zero tolerance for discrimination and that this is unconstitutional. I mean, I think that is the main point in terms of our legal framework to this. And that's one of the things that is so exciting that Veronica was explaining is it's been said by the Supreme Court that it's unconstitutional for anybody to make this decision except the person who is pregnant. And that's very different from what we've had as a legal framework of privacy and the 14th Amendment behind Roe versus Wade. But I mean, those legal things are very, very important, but what's most important is that we really, again, different people have different ways of doing community mobilization or gathering their power. But that to me is the main issue, because very often we complain about the lack of political will, but in my understanding of political will, it's directly related to what the people want. And the people have to show that by being out in the street, by giving services to each other, by helping each other, regardless of what the legal framework is. And I think that that's basically what we've been trying to say today is it's very hard to figure out what caused what, but we know that, you know, it's not just a point of giving a service. It's a word I don't really like that much, but you're empowering each other and we're empowering the group. And as a group, obviously, we have much more force to demand that our rights be respected. And even, and especially in this atmosphere of you're not patriotic, you're not loving your country if you're criticizing your country. That's a crock. Of course, people who love their country criticize their country because, frankly, both countries were so damn lucky that we have the opportunity to improve things. There are countries where people can't improve things because the regimes are so oppressive. And while we have oppression in both countries and we have enormous violence in both countries, structural and otherwise, we have the opportunity to move forward and make those positive changes. We just have to do it. We have to get over our apathy. We have to get over our fear. We have to get over ourselves, if I may be so blunt, and do it. And that's the most rewarding thing that we can do. We know that. And it helps ourselves as well as others.
I wish we had more time because I know that there are countless examples, just to your point of political will, that you and Veronica can share around ways that you've organized and influenced political will. But I do want to allow for some of the questions in the chat to be asked. And I think I'm just going to go in order. So one that was submitted by Chelsea, and I'm sorry, my screen is so zoomed that I can't see your last name, but with the upcoming US Supreme Court decision on Roe looming, how can we do our part to grassroots organize around this issue locally? And how can we send the message that this election matters? What can we do besides sharing posts online? So it's really for anyone to jump in. I think Senator Villanueva is ready to take it.
So a couple of things. You got to educate yourself and your friends as to who's running for these offices and where they stand on these issues. The reality is this as well. Someone, and again, I'm a Democrat. While someone might say they're a Democrat, we've seen this happen before, that just because they're a Democrat doesn't mean that they vote on reproductive right issues. And again, like that's their choice and that's their decision and those are their values. But we also have to make sure that people are firmly planted in those values and in those beliefs. And it starts with education. If this is someone that's running for re-election, like myself, I'm running for re-election and I am a reproductive rights champion. This is something that, you know, like I remember when I first joined the legislature, like it's a no-brainer for me. You know, again, I'm a young woman of color, but this was also something I had a conversation with my mom, because my mom and my dad immigrated to the United States when they were fairly young. They met in Chicago, very Chicago story. But I remember having this conversation with my mother. My mother said, we will always be pro-choice in this household. I have always been very lucky to have very progressive, like, and my parents have, who, you know, my mother who passed away, but even my father, who both were progressively more progressive as they got older, to say like, no, like we fight for this, we fight for immigrants, we fight for, you know, making sure that we raise the minimum wage, we fight for reproductive rights, like we fight for all of these things, and we have to make sure that we have, you know, our voices matter and are heard in these situations. But it is about making sure that, you know, people are educated about who these people are that are running for these offices, seeing their voting records, and actually, you know, knowing that. I know Personal PAC, I think, puts out information about stuff. I think, you know, some of the other reproductive rights folks also put out their lists. But it's also, you know, informing yourself and helping to inform your friends, your family members, those around you about the importance of this. You know, we haven't really seen some of the big marches that I think a lot of us are used to, and the acts of you know, of larger actions. But I think right now what it really matters is, again, educating ourselves, knowing who we're voting for on the ballot, but then also making sure that people who are running for these offices also understand how important it is for you. Because I will tell you this, as a legislator, when I get actual letters written by people, actual letters, like I get a ton of phone calls and I get a ton of emails. But when I get actual letters written by people, or even postcards, we keep those, we keep track of everything. We keep track of every phone call, of every, you know, email that we get. But when it's a letter written by somebody, that really matters, because that means that that person took the time out of their day to say, hey, this matters to me. I'm sending this to you. I am writing, because again, like we're so, you know, in the internet age where it's easy to send someone a DM or easy to send someone a message. But when someone writes you a letter, that makes a big difference, at least for me, where I'm like, okay, I have to take this seriously. And then also, when it comes to our champions, making sure that they know that they're supportive. Because I can tell you this, for every vote that I've had to take on reproductive rights, on, you know, inclusive sex education, which again, me, no brainer. I actually used to do trainings for a sex education training for high schoolers in my previous life. We get so many people from the other side who bombard us, who say, you know, and who will use every argument in the book to say, don't do this, don't vote for this, you know, you're going to hell for these things, all of the above. But the more that we hear from other people, it's like that say, no, you're doing the right thing, we need this, like this is important to folks in our community, that also makes a huge difference.
Well, and it's interesting, and the next question kind of touches on this, but going back to looking at lessons that we can learn from Mexico, I think on this specific issue, Chrissy asked, like, what's different in the social political context that can help explain kind of the two countries' positions or progress or lack of progress on the issue? Like, I think this goes to Veronica's point earlier, but like it, you know, where she had this moment of like, wait, we always look to the US as this model. And now we've kind of positioned, you know, in parts of this conversation, obviously neither side is as Nadine pointed out, there's so much nuance, but like, you know, how have you broken through in Mexico, given the political and social context, in ways that we haven't in the US? Or what recommendations might you have for folks who are trying to send letters and make appeals and provide services and support?
Verónica, en vista de un poco el contexto político que existe en Estados Unidos y en México, ¿cuáles son, dirías tú, las lecciones que habéis aprendido o las conclusiones a las que habéis llegado en México un poco para romper con la situación que se tenía antes y evolucionar de forma positiva a donde se está ahora, y cómo se pueden aplicar esas lecciones un poco al contexto estadounidense, dada la situación que se tiene en Estados Unidos ahora mismo.
Y diversas, empezaría por la que los ministros y las ministras de la Suprema Corte de Justicia de la Nación dijeron el 8 de septiembre, un día después de la declaratoria de inconstitucionalidad. Eso es importante. La Corte Suprema no es la más progresista. Hemos tenido una corte más progresista en materia de derechos humanos. Las mismas feministas no esperábamos, el movimiento a favor del aborto, no esperábamos este avance por la Corte Suprema actual, porque es entre las más conservadoras. En materia de aborto, nos dieron una sorpresa. Y la misma Corte Suprema, para cuando explicaba a los medios su decisión, decía que en realidad fue esta marea verde, lo que hemos simbolizado en el movimiento en América Latina como la marea verde, que es que las mujeres, las jóvenes particularmente, las más adolescentes, hayan salido a las calles a exigir este derecho, ¿no? Eso es lo que simboliza la marea verde. Pero además, obviamente no es gratuito que las mujeres salieron a la calle, no fue generación espontánea de un día para otro. Cuando se legaliza en 2007 Ciudad de México, entonces Distrito Federal, el movimiento por aborto teníamos una sola estrategia: exigirle a los legisladores la legalización. Cuando vimos la complejidad de que Ciudad México, que todo el país se convirtiera en la legalización como Ciudad de México, iba a ser muy complejo, especialmente si ponemos el ejemplo Nadine y yo de Guanajuato. Yo decía, no, pues Guanajuato 100 años después vamos a legalizar el aborto si esa es solo la única ruta. Entonces empezamos, frente a este contexto tan adverso, tan conservador, tan criminalizador, el movimiento por el aborto, empezamos a pensar diversas estrategias. No solo la legalización sede legislativa, no solo llevar casos a la Suprema Corte de Mujeres criminalizadas por aborto en prisión, no solamente exigir el acceso a los servicios de aborto seguro vía las causales, lo que ya teníamos derecho como violación. Empezamos a hacer un trabajo, como lo decía creo que la senadora, mujer por mujer, familia por familia, calle por calle, colonia por colonia, en algo que hemos llamado la despenalización social del aborto. ¿Cómo eliminamos el estigma, las normas sociales que tienen cargado al aborto de mucha negatividad, que nadie quiere hablar de lo natural que es el aborto a la vida de las mujeres, de las personas, y que es algo que siempre va a suceder? Entonces, me parece que el tema de trabajar por la eliminación del estigma, luchar por construir este apoyo social, que la gente pensara lo importante que es dejar de juzgar a las mujeres que abortan y acompañar su decisión, fue algo que generó un movimiento social que cambió normas sociales, que fue eliminando el estigma. Antes ningún político quería hablar de aborto, fuera progresista o fuera conservador, porque perdía votos. Hoy todos quieren hablar de aborto porque se ha convertido políticamente correcto, creo.
Give me a second. All right. So the first thing is the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was not the most progressive that Mexico had, and really the decision was a surprise to all of us. And the court explained that they arrived at this decision because of the Green Wave, which is the women movement that took the street and asked for the right to abortion all throughout the country. Because of originally, the only strategy that we were looking at was to ask for the legalization, just like it was in Mexico City. We understood that that was going to be a very difficult and very complex fight, and we ended up changing our strategy and do a multi-pronged strategy where not only we will bring up cases to the courts where women were accused of having abortions, or any other people that assist those women were criminalized, to request or ask for legislative reforms, and then three, more importantly, work people to people, women to women, so that we help eliminate the stigma of abortion from a social point of view. So what we tried to do this Green Wave was to, with the help of that Green Wave, was to change the social view and decriminalize abortion, not just in a legal context, but from a social approach. And that change has occurred, and that is why now all politicians in the country are talking about this issue, and they start seeing it as politically correct and not something that prior to this situation, nobody talked about it because they were afraid to do so.
I'd just like to add real quick, and then here's some more questions, that we've basically been underground, and then we were hiding in plain sight. And now we're not hiding in plain sight. In fact, as Veronica says, even our most conservative politicians are claiming they're feminist. Of course they're not, but that's what they claim. But the point is, we have a sense of humor, and we're thrilled to have this legal context now, but before, during, and after, we are going to continue the same work. Abortions happen everywhere. They are part of life. Births happen every day. Abortions happen every day. Children go to school. We need daycare. We need decent salaries. We need a respectful lifestyle for all. Nobody is safe until we achieve that. And I think that the idea that people who are conservative call us not true Americans, or people who are conservative say that we're baby killers, or that we're this or we're that, you have to throw that out. Traditional midwives do a limpia. It's like a spiritual cleaning. No pasa nada. Nothing's gonna harm you. If we are together, it doesn't mean that we're without fear. It just means that other emotions are stronger. And those are the emotions that bind us for looking together to get that justice that we know is everybody's right. And I think that, yes, we were surprised, and we're probably going to have negative surprises here too. I mean, already the church is planning this and planning that, and we've had different experiences. You know, I remember once around 1994 when the Cairo conference was happening, and that was a very important part of reproductive health, and a priest locally was saying in mass that I was the devil, and this happened and that happened. It's not the end of the world, you know, especially if you're supported by the people who think the same way that you do and feel the same way. It's not to be foolish or say that again, that you're not afraid, but there are other things that are more important, and that is the welfare of the group. It is our collective well-being, and this is just part of that. And I think that it's hard not to be discouraged in the United States. And I know an hour ago, Idaho voted on this and this happened and that happened. And it is a legal battle with this whole privacy thing that has been chipped away with Roe versus Wade. But something better is going to come along. It's going to be fine. You know, I really believe that. It's not magical thinking. It will happen because there's no turning back. There's no turning back. The United States is moving forward. Mexico's moving forward, and many other countries in the world too. And, you know, globally, we cannot turn back. We're all connected. Okay,
Well,
end of speech, sorry.
No, I was gonna say, I regret that I have to be the one now to kind of cut us off, and I wish that we had more time together, because I think that there's so much more that we can learn from each of you, and maybe we will do a follow-up of some kind. But I do want to welcome Orrin Jacobson. First of all, I want to thank you again so much to Nadine and Veronica and Senator Villanueva for joining us. Again, this really was just an incredibly inspiring and touching conversation. And for those of you who submitted questions, Jackie, I'm sorry that we didn't get to your question, but want to also be respectful of everyone's time. So thank you. And you've given us a lot of hope and a lot to think about tonight. And with that, I will pass it over to Orrin Jacobson.
Thanks, Chloe. Hi, everybody. My name is Orrin, and I am the co-executive director of Men for Choice and one of the co-chairs of Jane's Army. My job tonight is to talk about what we do now and how we take action. So as you all know, we're trying to build an army of partner organizations, activists, and volunteers just like you to educate, motivate, and mobilize pro-choice voters ahead of this year's November election. Our army is planning to take our message personally to the doors, streets, and phones of voters across the state. My Spanish is not that great, but I definitely heard Veronica talk about going friend to friend, woman to woman, person to person, street to street, community to community, and that's exactly what we plan to do across the summer and fall to make sure that we win in November. With our proven winning strategies, you can join us in the campaign across the state to hold anti-choice candidates accountable and make sure that we punish politicians for their radical agenda by voting them out of office and reward champions like our own Senator Villanueva, who is here with us today, for advocating for full reproductive rights and access for all in the state of Illinois. We'll have more virtual events like this. We'll take it to social media, we'll text bank, we'll phone bank, we'll knock doors, and much, much more. As Hannah talked about up front, given what's happening at the federal level with the Supreme Court and the likelihood that the Supreme Court may or will strike down Roe v. Wade, there's nothing more important that we can do at home than protecting the state Supreme Court in Illinois to make sure that nothing that happens on the federal level can wipe out the rights and the needs and the freedoms of the people in the state to have access to full reproductive health care and bodily autonomy. So I'm now going to outline a list of things that you can do to help make sure that we elect pro-choice candidates and defeat the anti-choice extremists at the ballot box. For starters, Grace is going to drop into a chat our pledge. It's a really simple form that you're going to pledge to vote pro-choice and to support Jane's Army this spring, summer, and fall as we work to mobilize voters across the state. It'll take 1 minute for you to fill that out. By filling that form out, you will be kept in the loop with everything that we're doing and every opportunity to engage and be part of the efforts to win in the fall of 2022. The next ask is to amplify our message. Not that hard. If you take that link and you drop it into an email and send it to 5 of your friends right now, or text it in a group chat, or share it on social media, you can help expand awareness about what we're doing and the risks and the consequences and why we need people to take action locally right now. This is really critical, especially in the state of Illinois, because so many people are paying attention to politics at the national level, but the consequences for us are really going to be about what we do at the state and local level this year. On May 4th, we're going to have an in-person event, which is amazing to be able to say after everything that's happened in the last couple of years. We'll have an in-person event with guest speakers, drinks, light food, and a chance to connect personally with fellow members of Jane's Army. We're going to send some more information about that soon, but Grace is putting another link into the chat right now. And finally, all of this is going to only be as strong as our support system that takes a ton of resources, hours, and people to get over the hump and win in these elections. So if you'd like to make a donation to support the work of Jane's Army in our fight this November, you can do so by visiting the link Grace is putting in the chat now. Grace, I hope you're keeping up with me, by the way. And I also want to make a special ask on behalf of our friends at Casa and Las Libres and all the work that you just heard about from Nadine and Veronica. As we mentioned, this work really is all connected despite being across the border. Grace is going to put their links in the chat as well if you would like to support them. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Hannah for a quick recap and appreciate all of you spending some time with us this evening.
All right, thanks everyone. I know we're a couple minutes over time. I just wanted to thank our panel tonight for this really amazing conversation and just hearing your experiences. This was a really wonderful conversation and I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. So I know we're over time, but I just wanted to recap a couple of items that we covered. So please take our pledge to support Pro-Choice 2022. I believe Grace has dropped all of these links in the chat, so be sure to check there. Please follow us on social media. We've been posting a lot about Jane's Army, so just amplifying that message, sharing with your friends and sharing our pledge. Third, we hope we can see you in person at our event on May 4th. We'll have more details coming about that, but we hope to see you there. And finally, please consider making a donation if you're able to. If you have any final questions, please drop them in the chat, or you can email us at janesarmy2022@gmail.com. That's janesarmy2022@gmail.com. Thank you so much for joining us and have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. Thank you.